The Forum at 8 with Xolani Gwala.
Welcome to the Forum at 8 here on SAFM, South Africa's news and information leader. Well, we're still broadcasting from the World Economic Forum here in Cape Town. It's the last day today. And of course, looking at whether or not there are any ideas coming out in terms of particularly dealing with the unemployment issue in this country. A little earlier on this week, Stats SA gave us the information about the latest unemployment rate. And of course, these are the figures. They say 13.6 million South Africans are employed at this time. 4.6 million are unemployed, but there's also 2.3 million discouraged work seekers. Now you're sitting with 6.9 million unemployed people in this country. That brings us to something like 37% of the unemployment rate. That's the expanded unemployment rate here in the country. But if you're talking about the official unemployment rate, we're sitting at about 25.2%. Those are some of the issues then that we would like to discuss on the program. What are the ideas coming out of this forum? Are we able to deal with these matters? And to assist us then in relation to these issues, let me welcome in our studios at this time our Finance Minister, Mr. Pravin Gordhan. A very good morning to you, Finance Minister. I thank you for your time.
Good morning, Xolani, and good morning to your listeners.
Thank you. Also joining us on the program at this time, Lynette Ntuli, Chief Executive Officer of Innate Investment Solutions, but also she is the WEF Global Shaper and founding curator of the Durban Hub. A very good morning to you, Miss, and thank you very much for your time. A couple of other guests will join us a little later on as we continue exploring these issues and some of the solutions. I'll introduce these guests if and when they join us here on the program. But let me start with our Finance Minister. Just give you a bit of feedback. Somebody called me yesterday after having followed the discussions that have been going on here and said, the statistics that came through earlier on in the week suggested that, of course, we're sitting with the numbers that I've just mentioned now of the unemployed here in South Africa, but 70.7% of the 4.6 million unemployed South Africans are between the ages of 15 and 34. 65.3% of them have been unemployed for a long period. 60% have less than secondary completed education. Now, that's quite important. 60% have less than secondary completed education. They called and said, if this forum is to come up with any solutions, the big issue that should be discussed here is education. And that without discussing that, then it becomes irrelevant. Has there been much discussions about education and how we ensure that these 60% people are becoming part of the educated?
No, there has, both in a direct and in an indirect sense. The question of job creation, the question of how we counter what is becoming, if you like, a mega trend globally, which is firstly that unemployment levels in most countries are increasing. Secondly, that not enough investment is taking place from the private sector at the moment in many parts of the world, although that might not be the case in the resources sector in Africa. Thirdly, that you're getting the development of technology, which is replacing human beings more and more. So whether it's a garage, parking garage attendant who is now replaced by a machine, or robots that are replacing workers, or I was talking to a European minister yesterday who was describing how in certain parts of Europe mechanization is replacing workers in mining, whereas in South Africa the focus is more on people doing the mining. So I think all of these trends, some of them we have to find deeper answers to than the ones we have at the moment. But secondly, there's no doubt education and training are absolutely critical areas. Firstly, your basic education system must work and work efficiently, both in access terms and in quality terms. And secondly, for those youth that are left out of school, haven't completed school, special measures need to be taken in order to give them vocational training. And what we've got to do more and more in South Africa is to explain to our young people that you're not always going to be able to wear a Gucci suit tomorrow. That we have to understand that being plumbers, carpenters, electricians, and bricklayers, and so on, are honorable professions in their own right, without which we can't construct anything or do anything. And so mindsets need to change. And my last point is that as South Africans, we've got to pump our energies up, take more initiatives, become more innovative, become smarter. And you don't have to be educated to be smarter either, as there's evidence in many parts of the world. And at the forum, there's an acknowledgement of what I call social entrepreneurs. people who come up with innovative ideas, usually technology related. And there's any number of examples across the continent and in South Africa of social entrepreneurs coming up with bright ideas that won't just make money for themselves, but could influence vast numbers of people.
Let me welcome my other guest here, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of Economy in Nigeria. Dr. Ngozi, I really appreciate your time. Thanks indeed for coming through.
Thank you.
Well, talking about what came out, any bright ideas in terms of dealing with some of the issues? I've just mentioned the issue of education. It's a critical issue. In South Africa, and I'm going to start here, we have, according to the statistics, about 3.5 million young people who are not in education, employment or training. How do we deal with those issues? And I'm not just talking about South Africa alone, but I'm talking about Nigeria and other parts of the continent where you have these young people loitering around who are becoming a serious issue where instability is concerned.
Well, I think, in my country in particular, we have an education challenge, which we are confronting, and it starts from basic education. We have about 10 million children out of school all over the country. That we need to focus on and bring in if we are to meet the Millennium Development Goals. And we're pulling out all stops to try all strategies, because it begins even with pre-primary education. You've got to start, to bring people up and bring them up, not with the usual type of education now, but, life skills. You've got to start building life skills very early so that everybody does not come up with a mindset of, trying to find a job, but actually of creating jobs and becoming entrepreneurs. I heard Pravin, the minister of my friend, brother, Minister of Finance of South Africa, talking about that. I think we need to change the way we educate, get these children into school, approach education with the issue of, with the bent of training. So often at home, we think of white-collar jobs as the ultimate be-all and end-all. I've often heard people come to me. In fact, the other day, a young man who is an accountant and has set up his own small accounting firm and is enjoying it. The mother came up to me and said, could he find employment? And I said, but he's an entrepreneur, he's employed, he has his account. He said, no, unless he has a government job. So we've got to re-educate people, retrain, and try to engage them in sectors. Again, I think we need to focus on vocational training for those who are young people who are not employed on the continent. We also need to think of vocational training. Germany, Switzerland, and some other countries, Korea, are highly successful at this kind of training. They train, we don't have good plumbers, carpenters, painters, even at home. We have to go and get them from elsewhere. So those are the kinds of things we need to focus on.
All right, I'm going to talk about policy in a minute because some analysts and Minister Pravin Gordhan would have heard this, are arguing, for instance, that in our instance, policy proposals just are irrelevant because look at what happened. First quarter, we lose 100,000 jobs. Clearly, there's something wrong in terms of the policy proposals that are made in order to deal with these issues. Minister, you'll respond in a minute, but let me bring in Lynette Ntuli because part of what also happens is that there's a complaint. Young people are saying we're sitting on the sidelines. We are not part of these discussions. Old people, such as our finance minister, with all due respect, are the ones that are making these decisions.
I take great offense to that.
My apologies. Lynette, young people.
I'd like to perhaps do away with the perception that the World Economic Forum hasn't involved young people. I'm a young person and I'm here, and there are at least 50 of us from the Global Shaper community within the World Economic Forum, as well as from the Young Global Leaders community, who are represented here in vast numbers. And really, I would like to say that a lot of the discussions have pointed us back to youth. And youth is going to be here for a very long time. And that is the next generation that we're building this very Africa for. So when we're talking and in all our discussions, the proposals that are being made, the solutions that are being developed, are not those that are going to only work for the African continent within this year, but really 20-year, 30-year, 50-year proposals are being made. Therefore, this particular conversation cannot happen, and it cannot exclude the views of the people who will have to take on the implementation of the issues around policy, of the issues around leadership, the issues around how do we create solutions, but more importantly, implement the solutions that many of the leaders who are here this week have been debating. Part of the program has also included perhaps a more youth-orientated program in the shape of Shape Africa. And on Monday and Tuesday, it was young leaders from around the continent sitting down with older leaders and proposing solutions, charting a way forward. And really what we're trying to do here as young people and bringing a young voice, but also our concerns, as well as certain of our solutions done our way for the future of Africa, is really trying to bridge the gap between optimism and practicality. You know, we don't dispute the facts that have been laid out this morning, but certainly we also need to bring practicality to a lot of this discussion and say, what is going right, what is going wrong, and where do we fit in as multiple stakeholders within the context of fixing those issues and making sure that we can turn the picture around.
Sure. But there's an issue, and again, I accept the fact that young people are represented in this discussion. Yesterday I was taken to Khayelitsha by another young person, Lele Mbinda. He owns his company, Tours on Offer. He's on the line for me this morning. Lele, good morning.
Good morning, Colonel.
Thank you very much. You took us to Khayelitsha, 40 k's away from here. I must be honest. I mean, there are so many young people in Khayelitsha just doing absolutely nothing, loitering around every day, and those are the people that we saw, you and I, when we drove around Khayelitsha.
Yes, Colonel. So I've been listening now on the conversation that you're having, and the biggest challenge that I think we face with is that they have policies, they implement them very well administratively, but the challenge is on the ground. They're not coming here. They're not reaching out to young business people right in townships. Like now, where I am right now, I'm at a business place in an entrepreneurial place. Okay, that caters for young business people. We're also having another engagement on this subject around the World Economic Forum. But what we find it so difficult is that now the key point that what is needed, we need education, because people here at the grassroots, they know nothing about what is going just 40 kilometers away in the city ICC. They have no idea that there is a World Economic Forum. And now, how do you hold something like that without really making sure that people at the ground level, they have an idea so that when they implement, they can feel like they are part of it and then they can benefit. Okay, okay. Just one more, the question that I would like to have. Okay, in fact, an example, that's a practical example. You could recall that in 2010 we had a FIFA World Cup. So what would happen is that prior to the actual games, they would host many events. They even took the World Cup and then they would travel across the townships and so on and in the rural areas. So why now they don't even have a live screening of this forum that is happening just here 40 kilometers away,
okay,
so that
so
people can know what is going on?
All right. I take the point, Minister?
No, I think the important the important point he makes is the gap between policy making and formulation of intention on the one hand and actual implementation and impact on the other hand. And I think that's the connection that all of us need to work on. Sitting between intention and actual practical impact is firstly the private sector. And we need to come back and say, what are they doing to make a contribution? Because they, in the South African case, are 70% of our economy. And some people would say in the private sector, we get up in the morning and think about money. We don't think about jobs. In the South African context, we need to think both about money and how are we going to create jobs so that we create a better future for all of our people. And I imagine that applies in Nigeria and elsewhere as well. Secondly, as bureaucrats within the public service, we've also got to think differently. So formulating a policy on youth employment and youth incentives and so on is one thing. Making sure that our machinery actually implements that so that people like Lele can actually feel it is the next challenge we have. But thirdly, is linked to the earlier points that we were making. We can't just wait for top-down initiatives. We also need bottom-up initiatives. So in Khayelitsha, there are people who are leaders, people who are organizers, people who can rally groups of people around and say, let's do something. And we come back to the mindset question. Let's have initiatives from the ground as well. When we were fighting apartheid, we didn't wait for somebody to come from somewhere else and tell us how to do it. We took initiatives wherever we were to organize people, to rally people, to explain the cause to them and say to them, come on, join us in changing what we have around us. The same spirit must apply now, because what we want to change is poverty and unemployment. The same passion that we exercised in getting rid of apartheid is the passion we need from everybody in South Africa to cure problems like unemployment.
Including the leadership, though, Minister, because the tone must be set by leadership. Leadership must say to all of us that this is a mammoth task. This is as difficult a task as it was fighting apartheid. So be mobilized. Let's rally the troops. Get everybody behind this objective.
I think you've heard the president say it. I'm sure my colleague will say it from a Nigerian point of view. I don't know whether I'm leadership or not, but we are saying it on the radio now and saying to people, let's get on with it. We can't just sit and wait for somebody else to come. And I'm sure Lynette will explain from within her kind of context how they are taking initiatives as well. In my experience, there are leaders all over South Africa, all over the African continent, some with hidden talents, some haven't been discovered yet. But if they just apply their minds, you're going to come up with very creative ideas on how we can solve.
And that's what we need, Minister. That's what we need, creative ideas.
Yeah, I want to agree with you that, we often say to young people in Nigeria, we are blessed with a great entrepreneurial spirit. Everybody's up and doing. I have to tell you that. And what we said to them is, if you're up and doing, government should not come and interfere. Do no harm. What we want to do is come behind and support you. So what have we done? We've developed 3 sorts of programs. One of them, I just want to talk about one, which is very interesting, is wildly popular in the country. And it's to support young entrepreneurs. And what we did was we launched a competition, a business planning competition, and we selected young entrepreneurs who have little businesses. Some are employing 2 people, 3 people. But the whole idea, we said to them, it's not about government or anyone employing you. It's about you becoming a private sector entrepreneur to employ other people, to help us create that social inclusion that we are talking about. And it's been taken in very good spirit. We launched grants anywhere from $10,000 to $90,000 for the winners. We selected 1,200 winners. I tell you today, those 1,200 have created 10,000 jobs already. We just did a first survey, and we're aiming for 80,000 jobs. We're doing rounds of competition. We are now doing it just for women, young women, anyone between the ages of 18 to 40 can participate. And it's very popular. We have all these women's groups and associations. As Pravin said, at the grassroots level, people are coming up, trying to identify women who can compete for this. So that's the kind of spirit we need. We need not to sit back. We need to challenge government. I think we should engage. What energizes me, and I think should energize all of us on the continent, is young people coming in, challenging us and saying, yeah, you can do this better. We have these ideas. And in Nigeria, people are engaged on social media, almost 24/7.
Yeah.
So, and they're busy, attacking government, saying we didn't do this right, we did this right, coming up with ideas. We don't always like it, but we're open to it. And I think we need this discourse, that provided it is constructive. Yeah.
Certainly. We'll open the lines, by the way, for that discourse to happen on 0891 104 208, 0891 104 208. I'll also be taking emails at gwala@sabc.co.za, gwala@sabc.co.za, and text messages at 34701. Just 1 or 2 emails before I go to the calls. There's someone who says, Sir, I fail to understand why do we have so much talk without changes? The problem lies in the development strategies and theories used by our country. In most cases, South Africa uses northern countries' theories to change the situation in this country, whereas what is needed is the decentralization of power. Government needs to support projects developed by the community, not design projects for community as of course, which is the top-down approach that people are talking about. As we can see today, communities do not any longer establish projects because they know the government won't support these projects. The agri sector is the sector that will create jobs for us, but our government has dumbed that sector down and placed too much focus on industrialization, and that leads to overcrowding in the cities. Policy change. It takes years to implement policy. That is according to an email from Mieketsi Mukele. Minister, I'm going to ask you to respond to Mieketsi in a minute, but Lynette?
I have to agree with his email, in fact, because one of the issues that we've been talking about is that obviously one of the central ideas around eradicating youth unemployment all over the continent is education. And when we talk about education, one of the things that has come up is also that is the education that young people are receiving today relevant?
Yeah.
And is it relevant to the actions and the industries we need to participate in the future to ensure the viability of our economies? And the large resounding resounding answer really from the young people I've interacting with is no. And we almost need to go back and look at the models of education, and within looking at the models of education, diversify the focus of the discussions and of sectors. Industrialization, infrastructure development, very important for the development of economies, but also highly capital intensive, money that young people have not made and cannot make to then enter those particular industries. So let us start from the ground up. Let's look at industries like manufacturing, small scale manufacturing, services which really take the initiative of a person to develop a business from there. Agriculture has come up as a huge topic for us, just in the sense that agriculture, we're on the land has something to give us, but more importantly, it can resolve many of the issues that young people currently face.